Can you put this here?
Yeah.
But careful, this one's hot. Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode in our beautiful series on the topic of the gates of goodness, where we discuss a different issue every night of Ramadan in order to bring ourselves closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, both in the month of Ramadan and afterwards as well. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, to have mercy on you and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from you and to forgive you for your shortcomings in this month, and to make us of those who are able to observe Ramadan properly, and of those who are able to observe Laylatul Qadr properly. Now we have with us my dear brothers and my dear guests, the original four, mashallah ta'ala. We have my dear brother Abdullah, and my dear brother Idris, and my dear brother Ilyas, and my dear brother Muhammad. May Allah reward you guys for your time, for your effort, for your sacrifice, for your energy. Alhamdulillah, at the very least today we were able to pray Taraweeh here together. Alhamdulillah, may Allah accept from you guys. So before we get into today's topic, which is very interesting and very powerful and very important, there's a lot to say about it, alhamdulillah, we want to first recap yesterday's topic. So yesterday we spoke about the virtues of the last 10 nights, and specifically Laylatul Qadr, because people are looking for it. People are asking about it. It is essentially what we prepare all Ramadan for, to get to Laylatul Qadr and to have the best Laylatul Qadr. The issue is, do we know when it is, do we not? We talked about this in depth. So maybe everyone can give a small recap for the audience, something from yesterday's episode. We spoke about many things in i'tikaf and all of these things, just as a piece of advice for everyone who missed yesterday's live show, even though it's recorded. Fadlan.
I mean, we don't know, like, when it's exactly, like, Laylatul Qadr, like the last 10 days. Like, it's odd nights, or like kind of the last 5 days, last 7 days, the last 9 days, last nights. But you should put lots of effort in those 8, or like those 10 days. Because if you hit like the Qadr, like it's worth more than 80,000
months.
1,000 months, mashallah.
SubhanAllah. And imagine, it's 83 years of worship. Imagine, even if somebody's unable to, let's say someone is too weak, what did the Prophet ﷺ advise? If they're too weak or unable, what should they do then?
Catch the last 7.
Then at least in the last 7. So right now, like we're getting very close. It's already here, it's the 21st night. And it's very possible, according to many opinions, it could be tonight, Allahu A'lam. It could be any of these last 10 nights.
My advice would be, like you said, exert yourself as much as you can. But if you, for some reason, you're just one of those people who just can't, no matter what's been told or what's been said to you, at least pray a few rakats at night. Just a few. Just a minimum. At least you won't regret it. This I promise you. You won't regret it. Just do a little bit and read a little Quran. I prefer you do more, but
Jazakallah khair. That's actually very true. So for the people who really just have a hard time motivating themselves, a hard time really finding a reason to pray every single night, at the very least, try to pray a couple of rak'ahs. Perhaps that night that you prayed would be Laylatul Qadr. And you don't want to miss out, because really, we mentioned, the one who misses out on this reward is deprived. Like, they have missed out on so much. Ya Allah, it's such a huge loss to miss out on 1,000 months. 1,000 months. This is a night like no other. A night in which the decree, we said, is ordained, it's brought down to the angels, and it's revealed to them. What will happen to us today, tomorrow, who will die, who will live, the provisions, the sustenance. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are able to observe it, even if it's just for a short while that night. It's better than nothing. And it's specifically in the last 7 nights, and especially the odd nights. Especially the odd nights.
One thing we mentioned yesterday also was we're not entirely sure when the last 10 nights are going to begin, because the month may be 29 or 30 days. So when the 20th comes, inshallah, just exert as much effort you can for every single night, because we can't be sure whether it's going to be odd or even, depending on when it starts. Something I also remember from yesterday as well, said Qadr has 2 meanings, if you like. It means, first one, which Brother Idris mentioned, was restriction, to restrict something, because it's like so many angels descend on earth. It's restrictive, maybe in terms of space, because so many angels come. We also mentioned that it's the night in which the Qadr for the next year comes down. So that's something I really took from yesterday's from yesterday's show.
Jazakallah khair. That's a very beautiful recap. Tafadhal, Akhi Muhammad.
I wasn't here yesterday, but you probably mentioned this as well. I mean, Laylatul Qadr, if you hit that day, you most important in the last 10 days is make dua to Allah, so He can help you get closer to Him. That's the most important thing, because if you get closer to Allah, that's it, you don't need anything else.
Yes, subhanAllah, that's the ultimate goal of Ramadan, the ultimate goal of Laylatul Qadr, the ultimate goal of the last 10 nights, to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to His mercy, to His forgiveness, to His blessings, to His praise. All of these things, Jazakumullah khairan, are a beautiful recap. And so ultimately, we want to work as hard as possible. And when someone is feeling lazy in these last 10 nights, they can remind themselves, listen, I'm going to strive. Tell your nafs, no, tonight I am lazy, I'm tired, but I'm going to force myself. It's just these 10 nights. There are no other 10 nights like these in the year. These are the best 10 nights of the year. Just these 10 nights, strive as much as possible. Now, of course, during the day and the other things that you're doing, work, and if there's a busy mother out there, if someone's unable to pray, they have other things they can do. But throughout the night, at least try to strive to take advantage, because wallahi, this is something like no other. It is a magnificent blessing.
I think there's a hadith, and correct me if I'm wrong, about those people who can't do it because they feel lazy and they still do it, they take more ajr for doing it.
So basically, I don't know if there's a hadith on this, but I know that the more it requires of effort, the harder, the more difficult it is, the more reward you get. So the reward is equivalent to the effort, basically. And so somebody, for him, like the example is the one who reads Quran, right? So the one who reads gets the reward of 10 hasana per letter, right? According to one opinion. And the other hadith mentions that the one who has difficulty gets twice the reward.
Oh, it's about the Quran, yes.
So it's about the Quran, that's what you were talking about. So usually when there's more effort required, you get a greater amount of reward. So we want to really work hard to make sure we hit Laylatul Qadr. One advice that we gave is donate every night consistently, and you are guaranteed to donate on Laylatul Qadr. And that's greater than 1,000 months of worship.
Just a question. We spoke about, reading the Quran difficulty. Would it extend to the sisters who are not able to touch the Mus'haf? Maybe can we extend it to that, or is it just for people who cannot read, it's difficult for them to read Arabic?
I don't really see a connection between the two, because in one case somebody has a difficulty actually reading, and so there's nothing really mentioned about a reward for not being able to read or touch the Mus'haf, because even the one who's in a state of janaba cannot touch the Mus'haf. However, we mentioned the opinion, this is the opinion that I follow, and many scholars have stated this opinion, is that women who are on their cycles are allowed to still read Quran. They're not allowed to touch the Mus'haf, but they can still recite. And we mentioned the example, as the scholars say, they're allowed to use smartphones and electronics, and they don't, there's no problem with that. So the good thing about this is that everyone is able to read Quran, basically, inshallah ta'ala. And so this is one of the things you want to be doing every night in these 10 nights. Read a little bit of Quran as much as possible. You want to be making dua, a lot of istighfar, a lot of dhikr, and ultimately, if you're able to, then pray as much as possible. And so we reminded ourselves with the foundational hadith of Laylatul Qadr, Man qama Laylatul Qadri imanan wa ihtisaban, ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min dhanbihi. So the one who stands on the night of Laylatul Qadr, imanan, with faith and sincerity, wahtisaban, and hoping for the reward, hoping for the mercy of Allah, hoping for His forgiveness, this person, their previous sins will all be forgiven. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are able to catch Laylatul Qadr. Allahumma ballighna Laylatul Qadr. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are accepted on that night and protected from the punishment of the hellfire. Today's topic, inshallah ta'ala, is a topic that has been prepared for really well and is very deep and very important. And this is a topic that changes people. This is a topic that will really change you, and if you look back and you see where you were and where you are now, most of the difference is because of what you know. So we're going to talk today, inshallah ta'ala, about knowledge. Knowledge is power. Knowledge truly is power. And so what we're talking about today, what we're specifically referring to is knowledge for the sake of Allah, beneficial knowledge, anything that will bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, before we get into the hadith, what are some of the ayat that indicate the importance of knowledge?
A lot, Shaykh.
A lot. What are some of them?
Like
the one where it says those who know are not like those who don't know.
قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Say, are those who know, those who have knowledge, like those who do not? There's no comparison between the two, especially in the sight of Allah. Another ayah that's often mentioned, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. So verily those who fear Allah the most, those who have the most taqwa, are those who know the most, those who have the most knowledge.
Exactly.
There's another ayah, and this is the one we want to start talking about and moving into the hadith. So the Prophet ﷺ was never commanded to ask for more of something except knowledge. Right? وَقُلْ رَبِّي
Zidni ilma.
زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. And say, my Lord, increase me in knowledge. Allah never commanded the Prophet ﷺ to ask for more of anything except knowledge, showing the emphasis and the importance of knowledge in our lives. And so knowledge will change you in this world, and knowledge will benefit you in the hereafter. And so we want to talk a little about the ahadith related to knowledge. What are some of the narrations that we know that people usually know of, the foundational hadith in regards to seeking knowledge?
Like من سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله طريقا إلى الجنة. Whoever like follows the path, like for like knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it easy for, like make it like the path to paradise like easy for him.
Absolutely. So this is one of the hadith that's mainly used. Whoever sets upon a path to seek knowledge, Allah will make easy for this person the path to Jannah. If you want your path to paradise to be made easier, then start seeking knowledge consistently. Everything we talk about today is in regards to consistency. So people want to earn Jannah, people want to get to Jannah, people want it to be easier. Some people find it difficult, right? The salah, the fasting, all of this, whatever it may be, staying away from the sins. They don't realize that knowledge changes all of that. Knowledge changes you completely. You become a different person. You become enlightened. You become wiser. You become more humble. You become aware of how little you know when you seek knowledge, right? So they say there's 3 stages of knowledge. The first stage is what?
You think you know everything.
You think you know everything, right? Somebody starts reading a little or hearing some lectures, or their sheikh says something or starts talking about other people. Suddenly they're like, oh, I have all the knowledge. They start going around showing people this knowledge with their arrogance. What's another stage of knowledge?
You realize you didn't know much before.
Okay, so you realize you don't know much before, right? And what's the third stage of knowledge?
You realize you don't know anything.
You realize you don't know anything. So this is really where you're supposed to be at, where you think, you realize through your studies that you don't know anything at all. And you think to yourself, subhanAllah, I know so little compared to how much is out there. It's a deep ocean. So a lot of people will come, for example, I work in a masjid, so a lot of people come to the masjid and ask all kinds of questions. A lot of people will send messages on Facebook or online or through email asking all kinds of questions. People will call random times, ask all kinds of questions. Some of the questions are basic, some of them are deep, some of them are very advanced, some of them are kind of silly. And so all of this falls under the category of knowledge. Knowledge changes us. Knowledge changes us. And so it's good to always ask. And it's always good to ask the correct sources, right? It's always good to get knowledge from the right places, because if you're taking knowledge from people who tell you only take knowledge from me, then there's a problem with this. If there's somebody that's calling to himself or to herself, don't take from this person. Because everyone should be calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So with the issue of knowledge, it makes the path to Jannah easier. Not only that, we have the long narration, which we'll translate and summarize inshaAllah ta'ala, in which the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us that the one who sets upon a path to seek knowledge, Allah will make easy for this person the path to Jannah. And the angels, they lower their wings out of humility for this person. And all of the angels in the heavens and the earth and all of the animals, the creatures on the earth and in the oceans are making istighfar for this person. Even the fish in the depth of the ocean are making istighfar for this person, the one who's seeking knowledge. In one hadith it mentions even the ants in their homes inside the ground, they're making istighfar for this person, for seeking knowledge. The Prophet ﷺ said in this hadith, he said the difference between the learned person, the alim, and the abid, just the devout worshipper, like the one who just prays and fasts but they don't know anything, is like the difference between myself and the lowest person of the ummah. The Prophet ﷺ and the lowest person of the ummah. He said this is the difference between the knowledgeable one and the one who has no knowledge, the devout worshipper. So you really are reaching a high, there's a big difference. There's no comparison between these two. So the Prophet ﷺ tells us about all these things in order to encourage us more to seek knowledge. And the Prophet ﷺ says that whoever takes from this inheritance of the Prophets, because the Prophets don't leave behind money or anything like this, whoever takes this inheritance of knowledge, this is all that they've left behind, this person has gained an abundance, a vast portion, a vast treasure. So you want a treasure, you want to get what the Prophet ﷺ left behind, seek knowledge. One time Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, he walked out to the people in the marketplace. He said, "Oh people, go to the masjid because they are distributing the inheritance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam." Everyone wants inheritance. So everyone starts running. Imagine like a stampede of people. They run to the masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they look around, they see like a halaqah of dhikr, a halaqah of like they're studying something, and some people making dua, some people praying. They're looking around, they're like, "Where's the inheritance?" They go back to Abu Hurairah, they're like, "You tricked us, man. There's no inheritance." They're like, "You told us there was an inheritance. We went there and all we saw is some circles of dhikr and circles of knowledge, some people praying." He said, that is the inheritance of the Prophet. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So this is the inheritance that we seek. But subhanAllah, some people want that of this life, some people want that of the hereafter. Right? مِنْكُمْ مَا يُرِيدُ الدُّنْيَا وَمِنْكُمْ مَا يُرِيدُ الْآخِرَةِ. So the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam tells us that the one who seeks knowledge is in a state of jihad, in a state of struggling because they're putting in effort until they get back to their homes, until they're done seeking knowledge basically. So they're always, in one hadith is mentioned, they're in a state of worship, right? Until they're back to their homes. Because they're putting in so much effort. This was the knowledge where they had to go places. So like for example in the past, you had to travel to find a scholar if you didn't have a local one. And sometimes they would travel for months. And they would leave behind their families. They would leave behind sometimes even their children, their wives. They would leave behind sometimes their parents who need their help. They would go try to seek knowledge purely for the sake of Allah through all of this effort. Traveling nowadays is so much easier. People have cars, people have transportation, people have airplanes. So it's not even difficult to go get knowledge. But the problem is we don't even have to do that anymore. The knowledge is accessible to us. The scholars are widespread. There are many scholars we can take from. And even students of knowledge that we can take from. So it's very accessible. The problem is people are no longer seeking it. People are not giving knowledge its right. It's not being put on a pedestal as it should be. Because sadly, and I know this sounds very frank and to some people controversial, in some countries, if you score like a 95% or higher, right, in your last year of high school, then you enter medical school.
Yes.
And like a 90% to 95, I think in some countries like law school, engineering, and this and that. And the lowest category are the ones who have to go into Sharia. The ones who have to go study Islamic law. So it's placed at the bottom. And this is like, I'm very frank, this is in many of our Middle Eastern countries. Right? So it's placed on a very, very, very low place. Very low position. Anyone can go in there. And some of the people that go into there are some of the worst people. And it doesn't change them. Rather, this causes more problems. Whereas, for example, in the West, and this is very common nowadays, a lot of people are trying to find authentic knowledge. They don't know where to go. They're trying to access the resources we have there, the limited resources. There's so much demand and there's so low supply. So many of them are going to seek knowledge in other countries like in the Middle East and in India and Africa. They're traveling for it. And they are actually traveling, leaving their families and going back after many years to help people with this knowledge. So really it depends on the person how much they give, how much priority you give to knowledge. How do you perceive it? Some people think, oh, that's just knowledge, it's not a big deal. We know if I have a question, I'll just go ask a shaykh. Right? But then how about your life? How about your enlightenment? How about your nearness to Allah? How about the path of Jannah becoming easier for you? This is the inheritance that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam left behind. There's nothing else you can inherit from it. So you want to inherit from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, take the knowledge that he left behind. And so we want to talk a little about some of the examples of how striving for knowledge is a sign of sincerity, right? Because you need sincerity. Can any of you tell us about the long narration? Tell us about the hadith, just the beginning of it. On the Day of Judgment, the first 3 people to kindle the hellfire, right? Who are the first 3 people to be kindled into the hellfire?
One of them is someone who fought, and they'll be asked, why was you fighting? He says, I was fighting for you, Allah. He said, you lied. You're fighting so people can say you're brave and courageous. No. You got what you asked for, and then he'll be thrown on his face into the
And he'll even deny. He'll say, no, ya Allah, I did it for your sake. Allah will say, no, you have lied.
Yeah.
Because Allah knows our intentions.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the first one.
And another one is someone who gave charity.
Yes.
Who, and he'll be asked, why did you give charity? He says, oh, I gave charity for your face. And he said, no, you lied. You've given charity so people can say you're generous. You got what you done it for, and he'll be thrown into his face on the hellfire. And the last one is someone who learned, who sought knowledge
and taught it.
And Allah will say, why did you do this? and he'll say, I've done it for your sake. We said, no, you learned and taught so people could say that you're a scholar. You know, and you got what you asked for, and then he'll be thrown in his face to the fire.
Billah. Wallahi, this hadith, you know, when we talk about it, you know, I gave an entire lecture about this as a topic of sincerity. Because this hadith is one of the most frightening hadith. That the first three people, I think Imam Muslim says in one narration, it ends with, and these are the first three people of the creation to kindle the hellfire on the Day of Judgment. Waliyadu billah. And look at who they were. People perceived them as something great. And they themselves thought they were doing something great. But your intention really matters. The intention really matters. Faith has to be there. So this goes back to even, you know, the topic of Ramadan, imanan wa ihtisaban. You have to be doing it with the right intention. And you have to be hoping for the reward. Not for the people and not for worldly reasons. So these are people who strived, but they didn't do it for the sake of Allah. They did it for the people. Did they get a reward? Yes, they got the reward from the people. And that's the only reward they get. But when you seek the pleasure of Allah and you do something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll get the reward of Allah, and Allah will even place the love of this person in the hearts of the people. So it's a win-win situation. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from insincerity in all aspects of life. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are protected from the punishment of the hellfire, to make us of those who strive for knowledge sincerely for His sake. We're going to go to a Ramadan report, actually in your country inshallah ta'ala, a Ramadan report from around the world, I believe from England, I'm not sure. And then when we come back, we'll continue talking about sincerity and insincerity and some of the steps that we can take, even if you know nothing at all, so that you can start advancing inshallah ta'ala, seeking knowledge for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Stick around, we'll be right back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ramadan in England. Islam is the second largest religion in the United Kingdom. There are more than 2.5 million Muslims in the British population. Many Muslims in Britain traveled from their home countries to pursue work and study opportunities in the UK. The majority of these foreign Muslims residing in the United Kingdom are from Africa, the Middle East, India, and Pakistan. Muslims in the UK follow the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in terms of Islamic practices, including the fasting of the holy month of Ramadan. Muslims in the UK break the fast by eating a few dates and drinking a small amount of water or juice, as they also prefer to remain awake and to wake up during the pre-dawn meal or the suhoor. Britain is a very busy country, and typically Muslims in the UK are not given leave from work or holidays during the month of Ramadan. Therefore, there are many restaurants that cater to Muslims in the UK selling halal food for the month of Ramadan. However, Ramadan is widely accepted across the UK. This is evident in all the universities that accommodate the Muslim students on campus. During the holy month of Ramadan, mosques in Britain receive large numbers of Muslims who come to participate in congregational prayers as well as the daily prayers and the evening prayers after Aisha, the Taraweeh prayers. In many mosques, Muslims spend long time reading the glorious Quran and many other Islamic texts. During the month of Ramadan, non-Muslims in the country are known to embrace Islam and take Shahada during the month. During the Laylatul Qadr, the mosques in Britain are filled to capacity. Wealthy Muslims in Britain handsomely spend their wealth in the mosques for the needy. Eid is a special day for all Muslims in the UK. Following the Eid prayer, they embrace and pray for each other, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept their efforts during the month of Ramadan.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back from the Ramadan report. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our brothers and sisters all around the world, to accept from us in this month, to create a greater bond between our hearts, to make us as one, and to grant relief to all of those who are oppressed. Jazakumullah khairan to our guests again.
Exactly.
So we were talking about, before we went to your country. May Allah reward you. Do you know any of the people in the report?
No.
Inshallah. I'm just kidding with you. So the topic of knowledge is very important. A lot of people think, that's not for me. I want to be a good Muslim, but I can't seek knowledge. They think knowledge is like you have to go become a scholar.
No.
Not everyone is expected to be a scholar. But you have to, first of all, the basics. What is the basics that everyone has to know? They have to know the foundational part of Islam. You have to know the basic part of belief in Allah, the love of Allah, who is Allah. And then you have to start knowing the basic fiqh, basic ibadat, just how to pray, how to fast, taking care of basic things. And when you have questions, you have to ask someone. You cannot just say, well, I have a question, I don't know the answer, oh well. No, you go ask someone, get some help. Someone who is trustworthy, right? So knowledge helps us in many ways. What are some ways that knowledge, can benefit us?
Sheikh, like as a Muslim, you are like a da'iyah, preacher for your religion. And if you have knowledge, you will be studying like a preacher. The Prophet peace upon him, said like بَلِّغْ عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً, deliver like even like a verse from my kind of my knowledge. So like you started being like you're taking like the Prophet's job description thing and like kind of try and go preach all these cool things about you, about your religion and all these things. So like you be like a messenger, or like the messenger peace upon him.
Subhanallah. Yeah, Jazakallah khair. By the way, I was going to say, mashallah, you are a good role model to people. Like when you convey, the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I've seen a lot of people benefit. I've actually followed some of the things you've shared before. And that's very important. A lot of people think when you have knowledge or you're spreading knowledge, you have to look a certain way or be a certain thing.
No.
They have the wrong impression sometimes, maybe because of culture or other reasons. But we all need to be good role models in general. And anyone can be a good role model. And this is what knowledge does. It helps us become better for ourselves, for our families, for society at large.
I just mentioned two brief things that knowledge can benefit us. One is the hadith, that 3 things will benefit us after our death. Of course, we've mentioned this before, and one of those is knowledge that benefits someone else. So if you were to write a book, or you were to teach someone something, that knowledge that you inseminated to that person will benefit you after you're gone. And the second thing is that knowledge builds yaqeen. It builds certainty. It builds that conviction, which made the best generation the best. I've said it a million times, but you need to have this conviction in your heart. If you don't have it, you're going to feel lost.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair. That's very beautiful. One example we want to give. We said people, they used to have to travel for knowledge, right? They had to work hard for it. And the traveling itself was very dangerous. You're traveling by 2-3 months by horse or camel or whatever it may be. It was very difficult. And this is something a lot of people in the past, when they did it, this shows how sincere they were.
Exactly.
So we want to talk a little about this issue of sincerity, because it's so important when seeking knowledge, because in our times a lot of people are doing it for the wrong reasons. And this is why we always try to renew our intention. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And we try to ask ourselves, can I purify my intention more? And you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you become more sincere with this. So for example, Al-A'mash, one of the teachers, one of the scholars of the past, he had a dog in front of his house in order to filter out the students that didn't really want the knowledge. He wanted the ones who wanted knowledge to work hard for it. So the students, they would see the dog, they would try to evade it. They found out different tactics, hey, you distract it, I'll run inside the house with a scholar. They tried to find all these different tactics to get around the dog. Some students, they just gave up. They said, oh, there's a dog, I guess I'm gonna go, until the dog is gone. And the dog stayed for a long time. That he owned the dog. So what ended up happening is some of the students made it, and he said these are the ones that really wanted it, that they would do anything to get it. So we ask ourselves, what am I willing to do to get knowledge? How much effort am I willing to put in to get knowledge, to really change myself, to become a better person? So when the dog died, Al-A'mash actually said he died fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah. And he was actually kind of sad about it, because the dog was filtering out the students who really wanted it, the students who didn't really want it. Another thing that shows our sincerity or insincerity is some people, when they get into knowledge, they get into the wrong topics. Right? What are some examples of this?
I find a lot of the time fatawa. It's a lot of the times someone will get that Iman rush or accept Islam, and before they learn some Quran and before they learn some hadith, etc., the first thing they come, this person said this and that person said that, and it really, I won't say that it corrupts their Islam, but they don't find these people improving on their character, too busy debating other people, and they're the ones who a lot of the time burn out.
Exactly.
And end up, some of them, stop praying,
right,
and really making a big mess of things.
And so this is this is exactly what ignorance is.
Yeah.
All of that is ignorance. So they haven't really gotten the right knowledge. They haven't been enlightened by correct knowledge, and they didn't get beneficial knowledge.
Yeah.
That's why one of the dua the Prophet ﷺ used to make is Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a. So Allah, I ask you for beneficial knowledge. وَرِزْقًا طَيِّبًا, and pure sustenance, وَعَمَلًا مُتَقَبَّلًا, and accepted actions. So this is one example. Another example is that so the first example is very common. People get into knowledge They become religious, suddenly they start knowing everything. They label this guy, they label this guy, they label this group, this group. They start creating divisions between people, putting people down. They don't, and most of the time, like 99% of the time, they don't even have good manners themselves. So they're not bringing people closer to Allah, they're pushing people away from Allah. And they think they really have conviction, like you said, they really have conviction that they're on the correct path. I'm correct, you guys are all not part of the sunnah, and you guys are this, and you guys are that. And so they're pushing people away from Allah. Knowledge, wallahi, real knowledge does not push people away from Allah. Real knowledge brings people to Allah.
Exactly.
So the problem is with the person and what they're hearing and who's teaching them. This is the issue. Another thing that people get into is they start learning useless or silly facts, right? Trivial things. So for example, one person came to Imam Shatibi rahimahullah, I believe it was Imam Shatibi. He asked him, what is the name of Iblis's wife? The shaitan's wife. And the sheikh responded, he said, I don't know, I wasn't invited to their wedding. And so subhanAllah, like meaning, like don't ask me this silly question. And one time somebody came to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, and he asked like kind of a question that was kind of silly. The guy was just always asking questions. And Imam Abu Hanifa was trying to teach him, relax, like you don't have to ask about everything. You're making it more difficult on yourself. So the man said, oh Imam, like if I'm in the river and I'm doing ghusl, like I'm taking a bath, and I left my clothes, on the side of like the river bank, in which way should I face during the ghusl? Do I have to face the qibla? Like do I have to face a certain way? And he's like, no, you should face your clothes so that nobody steals your clothes while you're in the river. So he's trying to like basically say this is like, relax a little.
Yeah.
So they were also making jokes sometimes, but ultimately you don't want to jump into the wrong topics. Some people, this is where a lot of people fall into this trap, they get into the fitna, right? They get into the topic of the fitna. So they start talking about Ali, they start talking about Muawiyah and Yazid and the people of the past, the war that took place, and it's an unfortunate event. But is there a benefit? Is there really a great benefit from you taking sides or talking about it? Probably not. Because they came to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and they asked him who was correct in that fitna. He said, I don't know, and I don't care, because on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask me about Nu'man, myself. His name is Nu'man. He said, Allah is not going to ask me about Ali or Muawiyah. He said, don't ask me about this. He never answered, he never talked about it. So basically, try not to jump into the things that are not really going to benefit you. Get into the topics that will benefit you. Get into the topics that you can start implementing, and get into the topics that will increase your iman. These are really important. So this is a combination of the basics of Islam, right? Now some people, they want to know if they're sincere or not, right? So we all try to seek knowledge in one way or another. We all maybe read a book or listen to a lecture or a series, or we're studying actively, whether university or online. Wallahi, there's so many resources in our times. There are so many resources, countless. We really don't have an excuse not to learn the basics. So the question that many people will ask, how do we know if we're sincere or not? What can we check to see if we're sincere or not? Yeah.
One thing that will show your sincerity is that how much of what you're learning are you implementing?
Exactly. SubhanAllah, that's the first thing I listed. So am I being changed by what I'm learning? Right? Am I being changed? Am I implementing what I'm learning? This is a sign of sincerity. What else?
Continuation if things become difficult.
Yes. So SubhanAllah, am I consistent with this knowledge? Or am I only doing it when I feel like it and I'm just stopping other times? So am I really trying to seek knowledge for the sake of Allah? That's another sign of sincerity. What else?
Delivering the knowledge.
So delivering the knowledge, meaning what are you doing with the knowledge for other people as well? So this can also show a sign of sincerity, in which it depends on the delivery method, in which you want people to benefit from it as well. Because a lot of times you read something interesting or a hadith that just moves you, and then you say, SubhanAllah, I want everyone to know this hadith, right? We've all probably experienced this in one way or another. Some people, as soon as they benefit from something, they'll go post it up online because they love their friends and family, and they want everyone to benefit. So this is a good thing.
Yes.
What is another sign? We can mention one more at least. How far are you willing to go for that knowledge? Right?
Yes.
How far are you willing to go for that knowledge? So what are you willing to do? Some people are willing to travel. Some people are willing to pay whatever it takes. SubhanAllah, there were two students. We have an institute there. Maybe I shouldn't mention the name. Where some people would go study for a year and then go back home. In the United States. It's there. So some students, they said, oh, it's too expensive. I can't afford it. Other students, they literally worked so hard, morning and night. They went and asked people for help, for donations. And they even made like online fundraising, crowdfunding or whatever it's called. And they said, please, help us fulfill this dream of ours to seek knowledge for this one-year program. And they did it. And they went. So it really shows how far are you willing to go? What are you willing to do? What are you really willing to sacrifice? Time, energy, maybe your ego, whatever it may take. So some people want knowledge more than others. Now, we mentioned how the people of the past, they would have to strive for it, they would have to work hard for it. And we know how the scholars used to warn us not to do things that would not really benefit us. So we want to talk about using the knowledge. Using the knowledge. So a lot of people hear things. A lot of people, maybe they're tuning in right now, they're listening to this. A lot of people, they'll read a lot of books, mashallah. They'll study with a lot of shuyukh. They'll study maybe a hadith, they'll study whatever it may take. And then they ask themselves, what am I doing with it? How am I implementing it? So you look at Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah. Imam al-Nawawi, what are some of his famous works, the most famous works?
Riyadh al-Salihin.
Riyadh al-Salihin is one of them.
Yeah, and the 40 ahadith.
And the compilation of the 40 ahadith, right? Imam al-Nawawi's 40 hadith. Now, were there other scholars that compiled 40 hadith?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like a few?
A lot.
Many.
Yes.
Many. Some scholars say it's over 100. And yet the most popular one in the entire world is the print of Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah, the book of Imam al-Nawawi, the compilation that he came up with of 40 hadith. And so you look at it, and the reason for this is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala magnifies your effort. Your sincerity goes far. Your sincerity is shown through your action. If you act upon it, you become a doer and not just a talker, then you have kind of fulfilled the sincerity. Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah, did he die extremely old? Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah, died as one of the youngest scholars of the past.
Yes.
Some said in his 30s, some said in his 40s actually. Some said 33, some said 45. Allahu a'lam. But either way, 45 or 33, he died young considering that he was a scholar. And yet he was one of the most productive scholars in all of history. We have so many works from Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah, right? And his books, even the few that we have, are super popular. Very popular. So Allah magnified his efforts. Now, we have the example of Imam Malik, rahimahullah. He was sitting in the masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was teaching hadith. Okay, so these are the students that would end up becoming the narrators of which book? Al-Muwatta. Right, so what happened was, Imam Malik is teaching them hadith. Somebody runs into the masjid. He says, there's elephants in Medina, there's elephants in Medina. There aren't really elephants in Medina, meaning this is rare. So everyone gets up, they want to see the elephants for the first time in their lives. And the students, they get up in front of their teacher, and they rush out. They run out right in front of the teacher. Imam Malik was just sitting there. So all the students leave, except for one student. Who was that student?
Shafi'i.
No, it was Yahya ibn Yahya. Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. So he stayed sitting there. And Imam Malik kind of like was confused. You know, all your friends kind of ran out. He wasn't like upset. He was just kind of confused, like, why are you still here? So he asked him, he's like, have you seen elephants before? He said, no. He said, then why didn't you go see the elephants right now? He said, I traveled all the way here to study from Imam Malik, to see Imam Malik, not to see the elephants of Medina. And do you know what happened to him? This was a beautiful story, and this is real, but do you know what happened to him? Because of his sincerity, and this is one example that Allah allowed us to see of it, and there's probably much more that we couldn't see. Because of his sincerity, now if you study the book, if you study the Muwatta of Malik, the narration that's most dependent on from the east to the west is the narration through Yahya ibn Yahya, to get to Imam Malik, rahimahullah, right? So Yahya ibn Yahya was not the most knowledgeable student there. There were students that were way more advanced, way more knowledgeable. But he was sincere. He was very sincere. So Allah magnifies your efforts. There was a scholar in Medina in the 50s. He came as a radio technician. He wasn't a scholar back then. He came as a radio technician, right? So he comes as a radio technician, and his job is required to do is set up the sound system for one of the scholars. I believe it was Shaykh al-Shanqiti, rahimahullah. And when you set up the sound system, you just have to wait until he's done with the lecture, turn it off and put it away. Come back the next day and do the same thing. And he was actually from here, from Egypt. So they imported him into Medina. This is way before they had, the sound systems. So what happened is, over time, he started benefiting from the talks that he's hearing, because he's setting up the sound system. Eventually, he quits his job. He becomes a full-time student for that teacher. He becomes a full-time student. He studies and studies and studies. After Shaykh al-Shanqiti, rahimahullah, passed away, they said they looked around and could not find anyone more knowledgeable or suitable to sit in that seat in the masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam than this teacher. And this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is truly a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a sign of sincerity. And his seat in the masjid was actually in the center, which is even more honor. In the center of Masjid Nabawi, they have the teachers all over the masjid. So he was in the center. So subhanAllah, our knowledge and our sincerity makes a big difference, and we have many examples and many stories actually, and we don't really have time for all of them. What we're going to do inshallah ta'ala is we're going to go to a report inshallah ta'ala. When we come back, we will continue and talk about some of the ways to continue seeking knowledge sincerely, and what are some starting steps, action items for some of our viewers inshallah ta'ala. Stick around, we'll be right back inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said was preserved within the text of Islam. You will find the companions talk about every single detail of his life. And it's not like someone said it and then, oh, today we say so-and-so person said it. Right? Whenever the Prophet, peace be upon him, said something, a companion memorized it. And after he memorized it, he then transmitted it to his student. And he transmitted it to his student. He transmitted it to his student. And it came all the way down till today. And if you ask me regarding any narration that I put in front of you, anything I say that I attribute to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, I can sit here and tell you all of my teachers, who said it to who said it to who said it to who, all the way back to reach the name of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Right? 20 odd people lie between myself and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and every single narration that we study. So Islam has a very rich tradition. A very, very rich tradition. You want to know about the animals the Prophet, peace be upon him, rode? We can tell you about that. You want to know which types of meat he ate in his life? We can tell you about that. And not just say it, that he may have done this. We know for a fact he did this. You want to know which vegetables the Prophet, peace be upon him, ate in his life? We can tell you about that. Which fruits he consumed? We can tell you about that. You want to know about his diet? We'll tell you about that. What color he loved? We'll tell you about that. What kind of cloth he wore? We'll tell you about that. Who were the 6 children who urinated in his lap? We can tell you their names too. Anything you want to know about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. You want to know his forefathers' names? His forefathers are who? Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim bin Abd Manaf bin Qusay bin Kilab bin Murrah bin Ka'b bin Lu'ay bin Ghalib bin Fihr bin Malik bin Nadr bin Kinana bin Khuzaymah bin Mudrika bin Ilyas bin Nazar bin Ma'adi bin Adnan. All the way back. Right? We can name all the names. You want to know Adam alayhi salam? You'll find narrations by Ibn Kathir rahmatullahi alayhi that tell you the narration of the Prophet, peace be upon him's lineage, which links him back right to the Prophet Adam alayhi salam, the first human being on the face of this earth. Right? Everything has been preserved. As far as the message goes of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, you want to learn the Quran, you want to know about the Quran, let's learn the Quran. Let's understand the Quran. The Quran is something that not just someone just, it's not something that someone just wrote it down and said, oh, this is the book of God. The Islamic text, the Quran, was preserved with complete authenticity to the highest standard for 1400 years. And how so? Not only did the Muslims write down copies of the Quran and have it present with them for 1400 years, but yet Muslims memorized it. We always made a point to memorize the text, right? And we memorized the text from a very young age. I still recall I completed my memorization of the entire Quran, page by page, verse by verse, word by word, vowel by vowel, dot by dot, and the very same way the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, recited it when I was only 10 years old. And we would come to the mosque and we would listen to the leader of the prayer reciting, and if he ever made a mistake, for those Muslims that have been there, right? If the leader in the mosque is praying and he makes a little mistake, what happens? The Muslims, they sit there and do they tolerate the mistake? They jump on him. Brother, you just made a mistake there. You better not say, Ahdina sirat al-mustaqim, otherwise I'm going to pound you. It's Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Read it right. You don't say sirat al-mustaqim. Pronunciation to the deen.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back from the beautiful reminder about knowledge. What we want to do today, inshallah ta'ala, towards this end of the episode today, we want to talk a little more about seeking knowledge, but then we want to give some practical advice to people of all walks of life. So we want to give advice to people maybe who are young, people who are old, people who don't have any knowledge but they want to start, people maybe who are new Muslims. A sister was messaging us a few days ago that she had just become Muslim right before Ramadan. So there's all kinds of people that want to learn. And they don't know where to start, they don't know how much to take in. You don't want people to burn out, right? We don't want people to kind of go to extremes or burn out or anything like this. We want to give advice to the busy people, the fathers, the busy mothers, the mothers who are raising children. We want to give advice to students in colleges around the world while they're balancing their worldly knowledge, how to also seek Islamic knowledge. So we want to do this, inshallah ta'ala, by giving some action items. Before we get to that, I want to mention 2 quotes of Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah. So these are things that are very important to keep in mind. So he said there are 3 types of students of knowledge. All right? 3 types of people who seek knowledge. The first are those who seek knowledge with evil intentions from the beginnings. And these people have a sin. Why? Because we know that the one who seeks knowledge for a worldly reason, as the Prophet told us, for a worldly reason, this person will not smell the fragrance of paradise on the Day of Judgment, although it can be smelled or discerned from 40 years distance of walking. Meaning they are going to go through punishment like this man that we mentioned in the hadith. You have to be seeking knowledge for the right reasons. The second thing is the type of student of knowledge that he mentioned who loves the praise that they get as a result of the knowledge, but their intention is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they are pleased with Allah and doing it for the sake of Allah, but when people praise them, they're kind of happy, like they like it. And this happens a lot. But these people are still, at the very least, alhamdulillah, they're seeking knowledge for the sake of Allah. The third is the one who is truly successful, completely successful. These are the ones who purely dedicate themselves to the pleasure of Allah while they're teaching and learning, and the praise of people actually makes them more upset. They don't like it. It humbles them more. Doesn't give them arrogance. The second thing that he said is that there are 3 difficulties of knowledge. 3 obstacles or difficulties or challenges. Number 1 is keeping yourself consistently in the pursuit of knowledge. This is a difficult thing to do, because we all go through phases in life in which we have to work on something else, or we have a family, or we have kids, so we get busy. So he said one of the difficulties of knowledge is to stay consistent. The second is that a person has to act upon the knowledge. Right? Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. O you who have believed, Allah is saying, why do you say that or preach that which you do not practice? And Allah hates this. This is something Allah despises. So don't preach to the people something you're not acting upon unless you are trying your best to act upon it. The third challenge is that he said that you are saved and protected from your knowledge, meaning that the knowledge will basically testify for you on the Day of Judgment. It will come on the Day of Judgment and say, oh Allah, this person sought you for the right reason. Now, let's ask this question so that people can benefit. What are some benefits we can say are from seeking knowledge? What are some virtues and benefits of seeking knowledge? So people can set their intentions right now. People who are listening and saying, I want to seek knowledge, I want to start with a book, I want to start with an online university or institute, I want to start by listening to a series of videos on YouTube or Huda TV or somewhere else. So they want to start. Let's give them the right intention. What's the first intention we can say, the most important?
Pleasure of Allah.
To please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He loves it. Right? So this is sincerity, pleasing Allah. What's another benefit, a good intention that we can add to it?
To spread Islam.
To spread Islam to the people, to spread the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, everything will fall under pleasing Allah, but we want to have these intentions clear so people know where they're headed. What's another good intention for seeking knowledge?
We can worship Allah properly.
We can worship Allah properly. So we learn how to worship Allah in the best way possible. What's another good intention? Another good intention could be to benefit ourselves, right? To become enlightened. So some people, they have a hard time praying, they have a hard time fasting, they have a hard time reading the Quran. They don't feel connected as much. Knowledge connects you to Allah. Knowledge brings you closer to Allah without doubt. These are the most people that fear Allah, as we said in the beginning. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. So knowledge will bring you closer to Allah. Are there any other good intentions for knowledge we can add to this?
It takes away ignorance.
It takes away ignorance, dispels ignorance, which causes many problems around the world.
Yeah.
Many problems for us as individuals, for our family members, for our communities, and for the entire ummah. And even for non-Muslims. Because we see in our times, wallahi, ignorance is what leads to all of these innovations, meaning these other deviant sects, these deviant fringe groups, these deviant extremists, all of these things, even the people who are trying to reform the religion, change the religion, make something acceptable that's not acceptable. So all of these things fall under ignorance, because the people who have real knowledge don't say these things. They don't fall into this trap of shaitan. So it dispels ignorance, it gives us enlightenment, it brings us closer to Allah, it makes us happier. Knowledge will make you more content. Because now you have more knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're closer to Him, you're always thinking about Jannah, you're thinking about Qadr, you're thinking about Tawakkul, you're closer to Allah. Knowledge allows you to worship Allah in the best way possible. So when you say, Allahumma a'inna ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik, and the best way to worship you, one of these solutions is through knowledge. Knowledge helps you spread da'wah to other people, to Muslims and non-Muslims. And that both are vital and crucial to our times. So knowledge does all of these things and more, and ultimately it brings the path of Jannah. It makes it easier for us. Yes?
And when a person starts seeking knowledge, even if he seeks a small amount of knowledge, that small amount would make him want more of that knowledge. This happens to me a lot. I mean, if, for instance, I ask a question because I'm very curious to know, SubhanAllah, why did God do this for us? Or why did the Rasulullah do this for us? The answer brings up another question, which and it keeps going, never ends. So
Like-
SubhanAllah, yeah, so it's the curiosity, the thirst that's not quenched.
Actually, like, increase your beliefs. Also, like,
Yes,
if
so it
you
brings you
constantly-
closer to Allah.
Exactly. Like,
So, this is a really important point, because a lot of people in our times, especially in our times as we get closer to the Day of Judgment, a lot of people are falling to the traps of, the rise of atheism, even though it's irrational. A lot of people are falling to the silly traps of, corrupt philosophies that all contradict each other. People are falling to the traps of shubuhat, doubts in religion. Knowledge dispels all of this. Wallahi, knowledge gets rid of all of this. And subhanAllah, the problem is these people, some of them who go astray, it's because they didn't find the knowledge, the correct knowledge, or they didn't find the knowledge that they needed at that moment to remove the doubt. So knowledge protects your faith. It's a shield for you.
Actually, like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders us, like, asks us, like, to seek knowledge, like in Quran, like, فَسِيحُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا فَانْظُرُوا فَانْظُرُوا, like, go and check, like, the earth and the skies and all these things. And the first, like, word was revealed with the Prophet upon him, like, اقرأ, like, read or recite. So, like, we as Muslims, like, it's something, it's not optional to be an ignorant Muslim or something like this. I mean, I will never blame you if you die, like, as like, a poor guy, but if you die, like, as an ignorant, I will blame you for this, especially for your religion. But some people, like, unfortunately these days, that they don't know anything about their religion, like, how they practice this or do this or do that. This is something, like, sad in me.
SubhanAllah. That's very true. And knowledge doesn't really have, and even more so in our times. Even more so in our times, because we have so much access to knowledge. Now, we want to now get to the action items, because we're in the last few minutes of our episode. What are some things people can start doing, inshallah ta'ala, to be consistent with knowledge? Some things people can use in order to start their journey of knowledge, or to continue, to give them this motivation, or something to take right now from today's episode, inshallah ta'ala. Yes.
See, how I would say, like, I find no excuse these days, like, to learn and get knowledge. You don't have to travel, as we mentioned before. You don't have to pay money or, like, exert effort or stuff like this. You can use, like, your current methods or, like, means as, like, a social media, or, like, friends or people, like PC, laptop, like iPad, iPhone, all these, like, really nice, like, wasting of time,
Apple
like
products.
Apple products, things I love them. You can use them, like, to gain knowledge. These days, mashallah, like, brothers and sisters, like, made, like, great efforts, like, to bring all of those, like, lessons and, like, lectures and, like, knowledge, like, for us, like, online. You can access them online, offline even.
Now, so here's one thing, two things I want to say about this, because now we have to end the show, inshallah. One point you brought up that's very important for people to know is, one sign of sincerity is that you're willing to even not just travel but pay for it. Sadly, in our times, especially in the West, a lot of people are not willing to pay for Islamic knowledge, but they will dish out so much money for other things, for worldly things, for food, for traveling, for vacations, for halal parties, for whatever it may be, and even for secular knowledge and institutions and tuition. But when it comes to Islamic knowledge, they become cheap. So, I can't pay for this. This has to be free. Not everything is free, especially if it's in a professional environment, or if it's done in a very professional kind of way, or a self, a degree or whatever it may be. So all of these things require some effort and some tuition and some, juhd, some, seeking and striving for it. Now, we have to close off, but we want to say this. One of the action items is start by finding resources around you, in your location, in your locality. Find maybe a local scholar that's trustworthy. Make sure this person is trustworthy. Find an institute that teaches online videos. And there's many free videos. You don't have to be rich. You can find series online. Somebody wants to study tafsir, they can go online, find much tafsir, mashallah. And find it in your language, find it in a way you can understand it. You can study, tafsir is very important, studying the Quran. Study basics of fiqh, basics of aqidah. You can find all of these online. Alhamdulillah. And if you can find a scholar or an institute to go to, that's even better. You can find many Islamic universities online and offline. You can find people who are willing to give you some time to teach you, people who are willing to answer your questions. We even here on Huda TV, we have Ask Huda, Alhamdulillah. We have this series that we went through. People can go search through it, and other series as well. So there's so many resources. If someone is busy, at the very least, they can set a small amount of time every week or every few days to study, if not every day. Even the busy mother or the busy father, they can find time, wallahi, to study. And even if it's as simple as reading a book, of seerah or hadith or something, wallahi, you look back at it after a year or 2 years, you said, I've learned so much. 5 years later, you've changed completely. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us beneficial knowledge and to allow us to be sincere in our seeking of knowledge. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for our shortcomings. Jazakumullahu khairah. Thank you to our guests. Make dua for the brothers here and the ones that you don't see behind the scenes. We will see you inshallah ta'ala tomorrow. Is our second last live episode. Jazakumullahu khairah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.